Now, as leader of the Liberal Democrats, Nick Clegg led his party into coalition government and then, 5 years later, to electoral disaster.
Well, now he's urging voters to join the Conservative and Labour parties in order to prevent Britain from leaving the European Union. He joins us from our Westminster studio to tell us more. Morning to you. So what an unusual plea. Why would you want people to join other parties? Is this admission the Lib Dems are over?
No, this isn't actually about political parties or individual politicians. I think Brexit's much more important than all of that. I just simply observe that millions of people who voted to stay in the European Union in the referendum then went on to vote for the Conservative and Labour parties in the election this year. And I think those millions of people have much more power than they appreciate, because in about a year's time, in October 2018, MPs will be invited to make a judgment on whatever deal David Davis and Theresa May cobbled together with the European Union. And at that point, Conservative and Labour MPs, who make up the bulk of MPs in Westminster, will need to make a judgment about whether what they're being offered by Theresa May and David Davis conforms to and measures up to the numerous utopian promises that were made to their constituents. I think it's obvious already now that that won't be the case, and that's why I think MPs should be urged to reject that deal. And that's why I'm saying that those people who are Conservative and Labour inclined voters anyway, who care passionately about this Brexit issue, should make their voice more heard by getting involved in the parties they support already, becoming active members, seeing their MPs, writing to them and pushing MPs to do their basic parliamentary duty next year, namely to compare what the government is presenting to them with the promises made to their constituents in the run-up to the referendum in 2016.
You know, we have been over this ground before with you on this programme. There has been a vote. So is it that you don't accept the vote?
No, we actually haven't been over this ground before, because what we haven't known until now is quite how the promises made to the British people by the Brexiteers aren't in any way being delivered. It's not only the famous failure to deliver the £350 million per week for the NHS, but look at some of the other commitments that were made by the Brexiteers. A VAT cut, that hasn't happened. We were told we'll get complete control over our borders. In fact, we're creating a new border, land border with the European Union in Ireland. And at that border, we will not, in fact, we should not introduce stringent new controls. We're clearly going to continue to pay money for a while into the European Union. We won't be completely free indirectly of judgments from European judges and so on and so forth. And I think in a democracy, this really is something which I think both Brexiteers and Remainers can agree on. In a democracy, if people have been sold something on a false prospectus, they have every right to revisit that decision, because it's clearly been sold to them on a false basis. So that's not new. That's not sort of going over old ground. It's not going over the referendum. That's simply comparing what was said in the referendum to what is not being delivered now.
In your ideal world, would you like the voters to get another vote? Is that what your ultimate goal is?
So the book that I'm publishing this week, which is entitled How to Stop Brexit and Make Britain Great Again, focuses most especially on the vote in the House of Commons in about a year's time, and urges, as I explained, MPs to compare what their constituents were legitimately led to expect from Brexit with actually the much more disappointing reality that is clearly now going to be offered to them. After that point, my own view is that what we should aspire to is to try and find a way of healing the divisions in the country, not by turning the clock back. I'm, as you know, I'm passionate pro-European, but I don't actually think you can turn the clock back to the 22nd of June 2016. What I think you can do, looking forward, is, and I've suggested in my book that John Major and the Prime Minister of the Netherlands are asked to do this, is sketch out a future in which the United Kingdom becomes a member of what I call an outer orbit of the European Union, where we're not in the inner core, but we're not being sort of cast into outer space either. I think that's possible because of reforms that are happening in the European Union itself. And then if we were able to establish that, then I think you would probably need to put that to the British people to see whether that new status of the United Kingdom, not in the inner core, right, but also not completely out of the European Union, is something that they're comfortable with.
I want to ask you something as well from your own personal experience. You've been a leader of a party under pressure. What do you make of Theresa May's position?
I think Theresa May made one fundamental flaw right at the outset of her premiership. She could have said, when she stood on the steps of Downing Street, when she was at the sort of height of her power, just having succeeded David Cameron, she could have reached out to the whole country and said, look, I'm going to try and find a way, a compromise, so that I sort of try and heal these huge divisions between the young and the old, between London, Scotland, Northern Ireland and the rest of the country. Instead, what she in effect said, and then you'll remember she went on and said, people, in effect, she implied people who voted for Remain were citizens of nowhere and had sort of no rights. She seemed to sort of seek to delegitimise close to half the voting public. You cannot do that in a mature democracy. And so I think her failure to be a big Prime Minister, reaching out to all of the country, has now come back to haunt her. And now, alas, she is basically held hostage by these warring factions within the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party now completely turning in on itself. It feels very much as if it's on its last legs.
Nick Clegg, former Liberal Democrat leader, former Deputy Prime Minister, of course. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.